So I've been making games and music for probably around 25 years. And then over the past 10 or so, I've been getting more and more serious, really forcing myself to finish games and put stuff out there, finish music and put it out there. And it's been really rewarding. I find the energy that comes from releasing something kind of feeding into doing the next thing. So to that end, a couple of things I've made and released over the past decade or so. So I've got music out on various labels. I've got a couple of games on, actually a few games I guess on Steam, Switch, Android. Got a music pack on the Asset Store, and then my brand as well, which I established over the past couple of years. And then a couple of things I'm working on right here. Hopefully one going out this year, and then hopefully the next the following. Really, I just like making stuff, and I like talking about the stuff that we're along the way. So let's do that. But first, pictures of my cats for no reason, and actually showing answers to a small experiment. So cat people, all right. Dog people, wrong answer. Actually, that's I'm happy to see that. Lots of cat people, so that's great. And obviously, Cosmocat's related to it. So I'm going to talk a bit about FMOD, what it is, and then we'll talk about getting set up with FMOD in Unity. I'll do a quick overview of the UI, and then we'll hopefully spend most of our time talking about some common sound design scenarios and how you approach those in FMOD. Plus a couple tips and tricks along the way, and maybe even some time for some questions at the end. So FMOD, in case you haven't guessed already, is a sound engine. And so they position it as an adaptive audio engine, which they mean it gives you all sorts of capabilities to make sounds that are very responsive and very dynamic. So exposing parameters that allow you to interact with your sounds within your game engine, adding randomization, all that kind of fun stuff. And we'll look at some examples of that. Really good cross-platform support, so it pairs very well with Unity from that perspective. A few games using FMOD. Actually, I learned a lot preparing the slides. Many of these I didn't know about. You might recognize some of them. And a few more. And then, of course, the best game using FMOD, not open for argument, I'm sorry. And this is like probably my all-time favorite game, and really a masterclass in audio design and almost everything. So if you haven't checked it out, if you've gotten stuck with a difficulty, find a friend or something to help you, because you will be rewarded. No, really, you will. You'll be rewarded if you follow and all the way through. And do something crazy like platinum and like I did. There's no licensing for FMOD, so if your budget is under 500K, I know mine is, you can do one free game per year. So there's no limitations other than you need to show the logo, so no big deal. Beyond that, you're looking at it's 2K per year per game. So if you're doing a lot of little games throughout the year, probably not a fit, but if you're doing kind of medium-sized games, it might work out for you. For my vector stuff, I tend to not use that much because the kind of capabilities it provides don't necessarily lend themselves well, I find, to suppression, which doesn't need the kind of dynamic sort of adaptive audio that FMOD really brings. You can still do a lot of cool stuff with it. But if you're just playing kind of simple sort of 8-bit type stuff, you might not get the rest of it. So first steps in terms of getting set up between the two, so you'll want to download and install the FMOD Studio and the Unity integration package from the FMOD website. And this does require registration, but it's pretty non-invasive as far as registration goes. I think they just want your name or email, maybe a couple of things, so not too bad. Once you've got that, you'll open FMOD Studio, create a new project, create a test event, assign it to the bank, and then build, and then we'll go through that shortly. So building is kind of similar to like a game engine like Unity, in that you build and it produces a binary file that has all of your standards that you don't reference from the game engine. On the Unity side, you can import the Unity package. So if you've ever used anything off the asset store, it's the same basic process. You'll just click the package, show a list of files, you click import, and you're pretty much done. Beyond that, you just need to point FMOD integration at your FMOD project. And in fact, you'll get an error right away saying you're reject, so you can't really miss that. Then create a test scene, add the studio listener. So this is the same like within Unity as well. You need to have your listener, so you basically tell the engine where your ears are in 3D space. And then either write some test code or use the event emitter component, which we'll look at shortly, to play some sound. And so pretty straightforward, one of the easier integrations like I said in Unity. So we'll hopefully start getting on the slides here. We'll go into FMOD Studio, look around a little bit, look at some of the basic UI stuff, and then switch over to Unity. Testing that setup, and then try to go from a pretty crude kind of audio design setup to something a little bit more interesting. And in doing that, we'll look at some common scenarios here. So we'll start off with something really simple, footstep, like that at the bar frustrator. Then start to give the environment a sense of space and sort of light. We'll show you how you can control your FMOD events with parameters from the community. And then we'll make some impact through contrast between the scenarios. And talk a bit about perceived loudness and how you can use that to your advantage. So the first thing you'll notice about FMOD is if you've ever done any audio work or you've used a digital audio workstation, the paradigms in FMOD are quite similar to that, so much more like a DAW than a game engine in that regard. So that's what I really like about it, is that I can kind of go between now I'm doing sound and now I'm doing game, whereas when I find it, if I do sound in Unity, kind of half doing game development, half doing sound. This way I can really just kind of swap my hat in audio design mode and then Unity and be in game development mode. So I really like that. The first thing you'll see is the event browser here. So events are really the main thing we're working with in FMOD. Each one is kind of like a DAW. You have these, well, they call them logic tracks, but if you were in something like API Live or another DAW, they would call them audio tracks or MIDI tracks. Within these, you have instruments which can play sounds. There's a number of different instruments that provide different types of behaviors, ranging from playing single sound, playing full sounds, to spawning random sounds all over the place. And we look at all of those. Each one of the logic tracks can have effects. Every parameter you see, every knob you see can be automated. So that's in GameDev terms or animation terms. That's basically animation. So you can have it controlled by something when you're parameter in the game, or there's something kind of like curves that we can use as well to control these things automatically. We can randomize them as well, which I'll show you. So lots of cool stuff you can do. That thing goes to a master. Again, we can put this thing here. And so we're looking at this probably mostly this demo. Next, we don't need to worry too much about for now, but it's basically like a sound mix. So generally, I'm just working mostly with a single master default sound mix. But if you're making a really big game, for example, you might use balance as a way to split up your events across maybe environments or something like that, so you have better control over when you load sounds. So you're not loading all your sounds into memory at one time. But for the scale of my games I've found, usually just the one day is enough. Assets over here, these are basically the sounds that are available to me to use in my events. So basically, I just drag my sounds and say, I'm going to use this in the event, and I'll drag and feed that. I'll show some examples of that. So basically, just triple over sounds if you can work that. And then again, similar to a DAW, we have a mixer. We have total control over how we group our sounds. I have a kind of default that I like to use, which is I want to play all my sound effects together, I want to play all my endings together, and I probably have like UI and music and other things. And so this basically takes all the events that we've run into that group and plays them together for further processing. And we'll go through some examples of that. So I'll switch over to Unity. I've made a test scene just using some stuff off the asset stores with standard assets, first-person controller, the Snaps, sci-fi prototype pack, which I didn't really realize as I was building this. Promoter is great if you have used it for prototyping that kind of stuff, but these are all built, and the way it works, it serializes all the mesh data into your scene. So I'm like, what the hell is my scene in 50 meg? That's what it's a little bit slow to start and stop the scene, but it does work. Now, this is by no means a gaming laptop, so we're looking at some frame rate, but we'll hopefully get some sounds, and that's what we're focused on. So there's a point out here under FMOD the package, under settings. This is where you're going to go initially on this point the FMOD integration at your FMOD. There's a couple of different ways to do this. You can also point it at a build from FMOD, which maybe if you're working with a sound designer and you don't actually have FMOD Studio installed, it might just give you a build. So that's fine, but ideally you have FMOD Studio and just point that. And there's some really cool stuff we can do with that, which I'll show you shortly as well, in terms of keeping the two in sync in real time with the game running, so you can actually make changes in FMOD and see it in the file within Unity. Alright, so we'll go this. And I've just done, so we'll start with the one shot. And I might need to bring up last through this little bit of chatter going on here. Actually, so I'm going to click this button right now. I wanted to show up a demo of just building and picking it up in Unity. So really, this is the way to go. You click live update, and that now establishes a connection with Unity, and now everything I do in FMOD stays the same. That's what I want to do anyways, I just want to bring up the can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, well, sometimes getting a little far and also making popping noises, so I apologize for that. All right, so very, very crude kind of footstep sound. And then maybe you found yourself in a situation where you just have one sound or something, and you want to try to add a bit of randomization. I guess the first thing I should say though, my first tip is repetition breaks immersion. So if you're going for realism and you only have one footstep sound, you're at a major disadvantage. I'll give you a couple of tricks for how you can add more randomization to your one sound, but ideally you're looking for ways that you can add variation through the sounds that you find. And one thing I would recommend if you are doing a new sound is that you invest in a really good general use sound pack that has lots of footsteps and lots of Foley sounds and just ambience and that kind of stuff. It gives you a really good starting point. If you're going on like free sound or things like that, it's tough to find quality. There's a lot of kind of stuff out there. And then you're also dealing with some licensing stuff as well. Like you might need to credit people. I've done this before. I grabbed a bunch of stuff from Freesound, and I ended up having pages and pages of credits in my credit screen because of the license that they use for that stuff. So when you're paying for it, you don't have to worry about that. You can get hundreds or thousands of sounds and not have to worry about pages and pages of credits in your credit screen. So the first thing you might do if you only have a single sound is you might add some randomization. And maybe you've done this in Unity, maybe you've written a little bit of code that will randomize the pitch and randomize the volume. And that's okay. It'll help. One thing I really like is within FMOD, so I was mentioning about being able to automate things, we can take pretty much anything. So here's my footstep event. We can take pretty much anything and we can randomize it. So right away, if I only have one sound, or I only have a couple sounds, and I want to create some more variation, I can say on this instrument, so this is an example, a single instrument by the way, so it plays one sound and that's all it does. I can just say I want to add a random modulation to the pitch. I'm going to do something extreme here just so you can hear it. Do even more extreme. So you can see the pitch is starting to change a bit, it's adding a bit of variation. It's not very realistic, but it's a kind of crude way to add some variation, and it's right there on the box for you. You might remember, like in the original Doom, pretty much everything had one sound, and they did this. And so I don't know if you remember just walking against the walls, trying to find the hidden doors, and just grunting at different pitches. So it's like very old school kind of technique. So maybe in retro games, it's a good one. Wouldn't be my first choice, but what I would actually suggest in this case again is that you find yourself a good sample pack, and instead of using a single instrument, we're going to put in a multi-instrument. And so what this does is rather than playing one sound, it plays from a pool of sounds. I'm going to take these 22 footstep sounds. Right, so right away there's more variation. And if we wanted to have kind of infinite variations, we could then still add that random modulation, maybe on the pitch, maybe on the volume as well. Right, so now every time it's playing, we're getting something a little bit different. It might be hard to hear out there, but it's very subtle kind of variations. So let's see what that sounds like. And so because I have my live update turned on, now I can just flip back. And now we're hearing right away the changes. Now, you might hear there's some that stick out a little bit more than others of those sounds. So, tip number 2, repetition breaks immersion, but so does too much variation. So you have to watch out for that. If you get a bunch of footstep sounds, the people recorded, maybe they were walking on concrete, maybe there was some gravel on it or something, and maybe in some of the sounds they got a little bit of extra gravel scraping or something. If it sticks out too much and you notice it, chances are your player will notice it too. And especially when you're playing frequent sounds, you're more likely to notice these things. So just be aware, sometimes you have to kind of prune some of the samples or clean up a little bit just so you have variation, but not too much variation. So that's just a basic example of how you might approach it. And there's some other cool stuff that I unfortunately don't have time to get into with FMOD, but very easy ways to, say, control the surface of your footstep based on a parameter, which is quite common as well. So maybe now I'm walking by some like a wet patch or some mud or whatever, and we can just have different sets of samples that we cycle through quite easily with FMOD as well. Whereas if you've ever done this in Unity, you're probably running a fair bit of code, and you probably have different arrays that you're dealing with while you're different samples. And probably your own code to do randomization and make sure you don't play the same one twice. And it's all doable, but for me, I'd rather spend my time just focusing on making the sounds and focusing on making the games and not actually writing the stuff to do the kind of the sound generation side of things. So what you will notice is it's very dry sounding. Like there's no sense of space here. So in real life, sound emits from a source. It bounces around off the different surfaces, the different geometry of the space, and makes some kind of reverb, some kind of an echo. And so the most common way to recreate this is to use something called reverb. And there is reverb in Unity, so nothing really groundbreaking here either. But what I am going to do is I'm going to apply this. Now we only have one sound on right now, but you'll see as we start to have more, I'm going to apply exactly the same reverb to all of my sounds. So rather than applying it individually to each sound, which comes with a cost in terms of CPU overhead and some hassles in terms of keeping all your reverbs in sync, I am going to use what is called a send return in audio terms, which takes everything from my sound effects group, sends it to the reverb, applies the reverb, and then it comes back into this group so it can do additional processing. So I've already set one up here, so I'm just going to enable it. That should be it. You guys, a little bit hard for me to hear that, but so now right away there's a sense of space, right? It feels like we're actually in a big room. The one thing you'll face with this is that's one way to approach it. The trick will be as you're going through different spaces. So say I'm going from a big room to a small room into a tunnel. Well, those need different reverbs. So you then need to program and say, oh, well, if I'm going into this area, change the reverb to that. Or look at using something that has physics-based reverb. So there's steam audio, for example, or resonance audio as well, which they'll actually do the math to figure out, well, where I am in the sound and the geometry and the surfaces, this is what the reverb would be. So it's pretty cool, but that obviously comes at a CPU overhead cost as well. So different ways to approach it really depends on what you're trying to do. If your rooms are fairly consistent, fairly static, and you don't go between different types of spaces all that much, just using the reverb that I've done here is probably a fine solution. It still feels kind of lifeless though. So I'm looking around, I see, hopefully you guys can see that okay, so there's a little bit of a, see I work in a dark room, of course, so everything looks really cool and well lit and moody, and then of course in a bright room, not quite as much, but hopefully you guys can kind of see what I'm going for here. But I see machines, I see a little terminal over here as well, so, let's say we're on a ship of some kind. So right away, I'd expect there to be some kind of like an engine rumble, some kind of a drone. So let's start by adding that. So I've already added, right now there's an ambulance playing. I just have everything kind of muted. So we're going to bring stuff in and I'll talk about kind of how it's set up. That's a little bit better. that is arguably a repetitive sound, but because there's nothing really standing out about it, the repetition is no big deal. But it still feels a bit kind of lifeless. You know, I'd expect in this kind of environment there'd be some kind of random sounds going on around me. I'm thinking like little steam sounds, maybe little beeps or whatever, kind of Metroid-esque or something like that. So this is where I want to introduce you to the scatterer instrument, and like the multi-instrument, this will play from a pool of sounds, but rather than playing a sound once, it will keep spawning sounds based on parameters that we've set. So we can say how frequently we want to spawn sounds, how far we want to spawn them from the listener as well, and then we have some control over how we decide what to play next as well, how many sounds we can have playing at once, various things like that. So I've just got a mix of like some beeps and some kind of steam sounds here. So put those together. So the nice thing about this, there's never really any repetition. I mean, there is insofar that I only have like maybe 6 or 7 sounds playing, but if we were using something like Unity and just doing all this work in our DAW and then bouncing it down, well, that inherently isn't going to have any randomization because there's going to eventually be a loop of the whole thing, and then we're going to start to hear patterns where I've put this little bit of steam here, this little bit of that there. This way, it's completely random, right? So you might hear, you hear the same sounds, but you won't hear patterns in it inherently because it's happening in real time. Now that does come with a cost, obviously, because it's all being done in real time. So there's a balance to be found in terms of how much do I do in real time versus how much do I bounce down in advance. And it's really just a kind of budget thing, like how much CPU do you have available, how much can you allocate for audio versus other stuff, like anything. I'm just going to make a couple little tweaks here. I'm just going to make these spawn a little bit further from the listener. That's not too bad. I mean, one thing you want to watch out for, obviously, if you're doing this, you want the sounds to look like you want it to match things that you see in the environment. And I don't see many computers here, so in a perfect world, I have more computers and more things that make steam. But as a roughly crude example, right away, there's a little bit more kind of life to the environment. So let's talk about how we can actually start to interact with the FMOD engine from within Unity. So in my ambience, you may have noticed I have a third logic track here. And what I've done, so I'm thinking we're on a ship, maybe at some point it starts moving. It's big, it's made of metal, so I want to hear some kind of creaking stuff going on. So I've added another scatter instrument, but I've done something a little bit differently here. I have exposed a parameter which I've called tension, just because you'll see it sounds kind of tense when we bring these sounds in. And I have set that up so if you watch the volume on this tension logic track, as we bring it up, it starts to bring the volume up. Okay, so I just solo this and bring it in. And so again, scatter instrument with many 12 creaking type sounds. I love those kinds of things, by the way. The ones that are kind of like, where's it coming from? What is it? Right away, a lot more life. Again, maybe some of these beeps are a little bit out of pace, but on the plus side, you can actually hear it from where you're sitting. So that's a good thing. But now here's a really cool thing. So what I've done is from my first person controller, I've exposed that parameter. So I've just basically created a public variable with it, which I put a range of 0 to 1 on it. And behind the scenes here, I'm doing just every frame is just updating that parameter. in the engine. In this case, I've created an instance of that event. I'll show you another way to create events. It's actually really not that much code. So give me a new instance of our event, attach it to the game object. I'm attaching it to the player just so that we're spawning those random sounds relative to the player, not relative to some point of the environment. So it's always like, oh, it's coming from 4 to 20 feet or whatever away from you. And then start it. And that's really it. That's not what it is. I can just bring that in. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of life to the environment, you know what I mean? Nothing's really repeating. Everything's kind of just overlapping at different times. And all we really have is just 3 logic tracks with a few instruments. So the last thing I want to talk about is how we can make an impact through contrast between sounds and through perceived loudness. And so that brings me to tip number 3. So louder doesn't necessarily mean louder. And I'm going to show you some examples of what I mean by that. So we're going to go over this generator thing. I've just set it up so I can turn it on here. Actually, I just want to make one small change in front of that. Just bear with me. This is a good time to tell you about this alternative way to play sounds within Unity. So this just ships with the integration. It's called the Studio Event Emitter. It gives you a kind of crude way just to start and stop sounds. So you can't really interact with them the same way you could within code, but just to get kind of up and running, or just having like a basic object and you're seeing that emits sound, it's a simple way to do that. So I've opted to use it in this case. In this instance, I have a game object that basically acts as the switch with a trigger on it. You press the button, and then it turns this component on. And so the behavior here is to start playing when it's enabled, and then stop playing when it's disabled. And I had a crude example of some machinery, but I want to skip that part and just show you the more interesting machinery sound that I built. And I'll talk a bit about that too if I have time. And actually, the beeps are going to help a lot here because it's going to help to illustrate kind of what I'm talking about in a second. So we'll walk over to our generator, switch it on. So I'm standing here, and it's a pretty loud sound. And you notice the beeps, you still hear the beeps pretty clearly. And what I would like is I would like this thing to be really loud, but the problem is I want it to be louder than I can actually make this thing be. Like, there's a limitation in terms of how loud you can make things with digital audio before you hit a point where stuff starts to actually clip. Clipping is bad, clipping causes distortion, and it's not typically pleasant. So the alternative is, rather than making stuff louder, you make everything else quieter. And so it's perceived loudness. So this will take over. If we hear this thing, we'll take over everything else. We'll push the volume over everything else down. I think the best example of that I can give is if you've played, again, any of the Soulsborne games. I'm a bit biased. They do great stuff with ambience. And you may have noticed, you go into combat and the ambience kind of just fades away. And then you take out the last enemy, and then it just slowly comes back and fills the space, and everything's kind of tranquil again. And so they're doing exactly this. They're using something called sidechain compression, which is quite common in audio. If you've ever listened to music, you've certainly heard it, and in games as well. And so what that does is it basically says, based on input, affect a group of sounds to reduce the volume based on whatever kind of ratio we define. So it's all fine-tunable, and I'll give you a couple examples in a second here. So I've set up a couple examples. We'll start with this generator. So we'll have it so the generator brings down the ambience, and then I'll give you an example within the ambience as well. So we can kind of stack this up. So we can have the tension, the sort of creaking sound that our ambience bring down the room tone and the beeps and stuff. And then we can also have the generator bring down all of that. So we'll start with the generator. So I mentioned earlier, we have full control of how we group things here. So I've opted to have one group with ambience. So all of my ambience events would go here. One group for sound effects. So that would be both my footsteps and my generator, in this case, go here. And then, so what I've done is from my sound effects, I've said this will be the input into a sidechain compression, which I've then configured over here. I said use the sound effects group as the input. I won't go through all the technical details of this, but you can basically control like, when it kicks in, how quickly it kicks in, how quickly it kind of backs off as well. And you'll see it's got a little kind of indicator so we can actually see how the two are interacting. So we're just going to, so we can see this. Okay, so that should keep playing out. Switch over. So basically, this is how much we're reducing the volume of the ambience based on whatever's running through that sound effects group. So if I now mute this, and you just watch this here. Let's see how the ambience. That's ringtone again. And now it takes over. But super easy to do with FMOD. There's other little things like that that just super easy to do with FMOD that not so easy to do with Unity, or in some cases not really possible at all. So lots of quality of life stuff like that. So I'll give you one more example of this. And so that'll be on the ambience track. Oh yeah, and just something kind of cool here. So the benefit of having your audio engine decoupled from your game engine, I will show you right now, as I just delete this generator from the scene. So watch what happens. So the game object was completely gone, but it's still played because I had set up a nice kind of fade out on the event. It's still, it's the same thing if I spawn the game object, it would fade in, delete it, fade out. So that's just kind of neat. So we'll bring up the tension here. So my actually, I think what I'll do is I'll do this. I'm just going to do it directly in here. And I can make one small change. So this is something kind of neat about FMOD. It's a little bit different than typical DAWs. Is within a logic track, I can actually have multiple instruments. So they kind of act as groups as well. So here I put both the room tone and our beeps and our steam sounds together in a single track. And now I can process those together. So again, I have my creaking sounds acting as an input into my sidechain on the bass tone and the beeps and all that stuff. And so you'll see here as I bring in the tension, again, it's going to reduce that. Right, so the creaking sounds kind of take over everything else. So when you couple that with the sidechain that I've set up on the main mixer, now we get the ability to control very easily how loud things are perceived, but we're not actually making anything louder at any point. Maybe a few dB, but overall everything else is just kind of making room for the big sounds. So an interesting kind of mental thing that goes on there when you do that. And you never end up actually causing distortion, which is definitely want to avoid that if possible. That's pretty much everything I wanted to go through. Looks like we have a bit of time, so I'll take some questions now. Yep.
For the retro games you made, you said that you didn't use FMOD, right?
That's right, yeah.
What program would you use?
So one of them I did use FMOD, and I had a lot of fun making actually, like, because in that game, the deaths are kind of over the top, like physics-based, and your body flies over the place. So I had a ton of fun making the gore sounds in FMOD. is a perfect example of how to use the stuff I just looked at. In one of the other ones, I just used Unity and just did kind of the basic like playing audio clip stuff. Nothing too fancy. Which is fine, like again, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like there's overhead in setting this up, there's overhead in building all these sounds, there's overhead in terms of extra CPU, so really depends what you're going for. Not a fit for everything, but if you want to make something with really detailed, dynamic, adaptive type audio, definitely a potential option for that. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, just wondering, does FMOD have tools that allow you to put specific notes in the actual Unity environment to, you know, so as you're getting closer to one thing, it'll get louder because of it?
Yeah, so that is the component we looked at. I just deleted it, but the FMOD event emitter that comes out of the box. So you can just drag that onto. Here, I'll just stop this so we can see it again. So on the generator here, I have the studio event emitter, and that will play a sound potentially in 3D space. Now we can decide when we're setting up the sound or the event in FMOD, we can say if the sound is 2D or 3D, so it will behave differently depending on how we set it up. But assuming it's a 3D sound, this will play relative to the listener. So if we have the listener attached to, say, our first-person controller, it will get louder as we walk towards it inherently right away. So,
Thank you.
okay. Any other questions? Actually, I will put up my Twitters, and my email. I love talking about this stuff, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you would like copies of the projects that I set up. Yeah, another question?
All right, do you have any projects currently in the use where you intend to use FMOD? Because I know there are some cases where you wouldn't be ready to use it.
Yeah, I have two I'm working on. One I'm using FMOD, one I'm using just Unity. Yeah, the one I'm using FMOD for is again more immersive, more, I won't say realistic, but a little bit more in that vein. It's 3D. It's I'm going for.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Oh yeah, there's one.
I've never talked to mine before. This is the first time. Anyway, you mentioned something before about getting free sounds and stuff inspired by your own, but could you make your own? Like, is there like, I don't know if you mentioned it before, could you like, is there any ways you suggest to make your own sounds that doesn't require?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a number of ways you can make your own. Again, depending on what you're going for, you can go from recording your own if you're going for realistic, in which case you'd want to have a good recording setup, so you'd want to have a good mic and a good audio interface and a good environment, a good room that you can record in, so fairly involved. If you're going for retro sounds, I know there are tools out there you can actually use to generate kind of retro game sounds, or you can build your own using various synthesizers and things like that. Or you can mix the two as well, if you're going for kind of something in between, take some real sounds that you've recorded, maybe do some processing, and mix them with some synthesized sounds. That's fairly common. So, lots of different approaches, lots of different tools out there, depending on what you're trying to achieve. No problem.
Great question.
Anyone else? Yeah.
How's the FMOD integration with other mainstream engines, Unreal or GameMaker?
That's a good question. I can't speak to GameMaker. I know there is an integration with Unreal. That's all I know. To be honest, I haven't really looked into it, but I know, the major ones, you're good. Beyond that, not sure. I have seen, though, when I was just doing a bit of research, it is possible to do your own. I'm not suggesting to do your own integration, but other people have kind of taken that up, and I've seen integrations for less common engines, so it's certainly possible, and there may be one for Game Maker that somebody's just kind of picked up on their own as well. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. I hope this was informative.